The Star Wars sequel trilogy, the Disney trilogy, does it already exist in an alternate timeline? That's what we're going to discuss today. Now, a few days ago, I made a video talking about Jon Favreau's latest comments and the future direction of the Star Wars universe, and I said in that video, while I hope I'm wrong, I hope I'm 100% wrong, I believe that we are still heading towards Jake Skywalker. All roads lead to Jake Skywalker in the sequel trilogy. So we can't really get excited for anything that's happened in The Mandalorian outside of being excited in those moments. I found a lot of really good moments in The Mandalorian, but it all is tainted by the fact that we are heading to the sequel trilogy. And in the comments section of that video and emails and messages, so many people reached out to me and they said, you have to watch Lore Star's video talking about how Filoni has already put the sequel trilogy in an alternate timeline. Now, a few comments here, a few comments there, no big deal, but there were a lot of people telling me to watch this video, a lot of emails, a lot of messages. So finally, I reached out to Lore Star. I said, do you mind if I react to your video talking about Filoni has already put the sequels in an alternate timeline? And Lore Star graciously gave me permission to do that. I wanted to do that out of respect. Lore Star is a great YouTube channel, great Star Wars channel, so I'm going to link his channel and this video. But I have not seen this video, so we're going to watch it together. It's got a ton of views. It's got 475,000 views. It's got an insane like to dislike ratio. Will it change my mind? I don't know, but I figure we'll just react to it together and watch it, so let's check it out.
Truly wonderful, the mind of a child.
What is this place?
A conduit through which the entire force...
Luminous beings so we, not this truth vector. Train yourself to let go.
So this is the world in between worlds. If you have not seen Star Wars Rebels, you might be a little confused. But Star Wars Rebels was a... It took place, so you had the Season 2 finale with Vader and Ahsoka, and you were kind of left on a cliffhanger. It kind of led you to believe that Ahsoka might be dead. I believe it was Season 4 where the world in between worlds appeared, and Ezra Bridger ended up in this place that was kind of like a space in between time and within the universe, and he pulled Ahsoka out of that moment right before Vader was going to kill her. And that's been a lot of the speculation for a lot of people when that moment happened, when Ezra pulled Ahsoka through this thing right here that we're looking at off of Malachor. That was where her and Vader were fighting on Malachor. Ezra pulled her out of that moment, and a lot of people have pointed to this being a potential way to erase the sequel trilogy. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that moment was written before The Last Jedi, so could this be a convenient moment after the fact? Absolutely. But I'm going to shut up.
Of everything you fear to lose.
What you need, you already have. Unfortunately, you seem to be letting it all go.
I won't let him lose his way. Not like I did.
The future, by its nature, can be changed.
Here in this place, I can change things.
You don't know
You don't know that.
Go to the planet Tython. There's a chance a Jedi may sense his presence and come searching for him.
Don't you see?
You think that Kanan sent you here to help me? It's a
Pathway between all time and space.
My friends, like many, I was blown away by the season finale for The Mandalorian Season 2. But once the dust settled, I began to prepare to answer questions and break the season down, and I realized that something was off. Something big. Something that changes the entire narrative of canon as we understood it. I tried to write it off or find a way to explain it, since all the evidence seemed to point to a theory that I've been a large denier of. But I can't remain ignorant any longer. When all the evidence stares you in the face and refuses to back down, it's time to admit the truth. This is that truth. Today we look at The Mandalorian Season 2 and how it changed everything. To start, we need to look at the history of the galaxy according to the sequel trilogy and surrounding material. According to that historical account, It begins with Luke redeeming Vader in Return of the Jedi. Immediately after Endor, Luke begins training Leia, but he stops her training about a year after Endor when she has a vision that her training will lead to the death of her son. Luke promises that he will train Leia's son when he reaches the age of 10 and would spend the next 11 years preparing for that time. During that time, Luke focuses his energy on searching for Jedi temples and artifacts in order to be better prepared to open his own Jedi temple. He takes Ben after his 10th birthday and opens his own Jedi temple, which is about 6 years after the events of The Mandalorian. According to that history, Ben was Luke's first apprentice. After that, Snoke reaches out to Ben, yada yada, we all know the rest. Now, there are some very important ways that the sequel trilogy is connected to The Mandalorian. First, we know that the Empire in The Mandalorian wants Grogu for his blood, and that Dr. Pershing, a cloning expert, is in charge of this research. Furthermore, we know that Snoke is a strandcast, basically a completely bioengineered being, almost like a clone without a host. The experiments we see that were made from Grogu's blood in The Mandalorian Season 2 also happen to look an awful lot like Snoke. If it's true that Snoke is grown from Grogu's blood, then the Empire would have had to have successfully captured Grogu at some point and used his blood to make Snoke, since we know that by the time Grogu is rescued, they had not yet been successful in learning how to properly use his blood. The important thing about Grogu and the reason the Empire wants him is that he has a high M count, and we learn from the Rise of Skywalker novelization that it's almost impossible to produce a Force-sensitive clone or strandcast. The Empire was trying to take Grogu to learn how to transfer his Force sensitivity into a clone or strandcast. But this leads us to ask, where was Grogu during the sequels? Was he killed by Ben in the raid on Luke's Jedi Temple? Well, I suggest that Grogu is actually in Palpatine's possession in The Rise of Skywalker. We see in The Rise of Skywalker that Palpatine is continuing to grow Snoke's, implying that he still has access to the child's blood. But that begs the question, when did the Imperials get Grogu? Because I don't believe that the blood that they would have gotten from him before his rescue would have been enough to create that many Snoke clones. I suggest that that moment already happened, only in another timeline. A timeline where Ahsoka died. You see, if Ahsoka had died, no one would have sent the Mandalorian to Tython, but the Empire would have still caught up with him since he was already being tracked. Presuming that Mando still got his crew together to find Moff Gideon and that the rest of the events played out the same, this is where things would have changed.
You're about to face off with the Dark Troopers. You had your hands full with one. Let's see how you do against a platoon. Everyone in this room will be dead. But me and the child.
You see, if Ahsoka had not directed them to Tython, then the child wouldn't have called out through the Force. And then, if the child hadn't called out through the Force, Luke would not have answered Grogu's call. Mando and his crew would have gone to rescue Grogu, but here, at this moment, everyone would have died and Moff Gideon would be free to take the child. We know that even one Dark Trooper was overwhelming for this crew, and an entire platoon of them would have certainly been too much for them to handle. If it weren't for Luke, this would be where the Empire secured Grogu and kept him forever. See, I propose that the sequel era is a timeline where Ahsoka died. Luke never heard Grogu on Tython, and the Imperials kept the child.
Well, we do know that Ahsoka is dead in the sequels because the bullshit about I've only seen it one time, but when she's like, "I'm all the Jedi," and we hear all of the Jedi voices, and Ahsoka is one of those voices. She's a voice of a past Jedi. Let me hear what he's got to say.
We know, for example, that in the old timeline, Luke didn't have any apprentices until Ben was 10 years old. But here, we see him take Grogu 6 years ahead of schedule, meaning that by the time Luke was ready to train Ben, he would have already had 6 years of practice, making him a better teacher, more equipped to train Ben. Furthermore, if the Imperials didn't have enough of Grogu's blood, they wouldn't have been able to make Snoke. And without Snoke to whisper in Ben's ear, his descent to the dark side would have been seriously hampered. So when did this split of timelines happen? Well, the linchpin for all these events is here. In Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, Ezra enters into a corner of the cosmic force and uses it to save Ahsoka from Darth Vader. It seems interesting to me that everything past Chapter 14 hinges on this change. Ahsoka is the linchpin. She is the thread holding all of this together, and without the actions of Ezra Bridger, Grogu would have been lost to the Empire, and the Mandalorian would be dead, and Luke wouldn't have trained anyone until Ben Solo reached the age of 10 years old. I find it interesting that Filoni and Favreau created a conclusion for the Mandalorian that depends on that linchpin, and then connected that conclusion with Luke. And they connected it in a way that directly contradicts the sequels. Almost as if the sequels is what would have happened to Luke if Ahsoka had died. Almost like a warning, a what if. And this isn't without evidence either. There are several keys and clues that tell us that something is off. First, when Rey becomes all of the Jedi, we can hear the voices of several dead Jedi speaking to her, along with Ahsoka.
Let's guide you as it guided us.
Feel the Force flowing through you.
This stuck out to fans because we didn't know that Ahsoka had died, and if she didn't, she would be the only living Jedi to be speaking to Rey in this moment. Almost as if this scene takes place in a separate timeline. A timeline where Ahsoka did die 39 years ago. Second is the absence of Grogu in the sequels. Obviously, in our world or behind the scenes, he wasn't created yet, which is why he wouldn't be there, but that's why it's such an odd choice to send him with Luke, since we know what happens to Luke, or at least we thought we did. I was so sure that Grogu wouldn't go with Luke because Luke's story is already written. But what if Grogu changes that story? What if his path can change the events that we thought we knew? Next is something we mentioned before, but that was that Ben was Luke's first student, and that he waited until his 10th birthday to train him. As we said before, The Mandalorian takes place 6 years before that. Either this is a massive retcon, or these two events take place in alternate realities. One where Ahsoka died, and the other, Ahsoka lives. Finally, back when The Force Awakens was still new, it was revealed that Snoke had been an observer for the rise and fall of the Empire, but that he was a passive observer, while we learned in The Rise of Skywalker that he was himself created after the supposed death of Palpatine. However, if he was made from Grogu's blood, Grogu was someone who was a passive observer for both rise and fall of the Empire. From the beginning, I have been a massive skeptic of the sequel retcon theory. I just thought there was no way they'd use the world between worlds again. But as I've gathered evidence trying to answer these questions for you all, the more I do, the more I find myself unable to deny that the Mandalorians and the sequels really cancel each other out. I think it's not that they're going to retcon the sequels. I think they already did it. And it started when Filoni walked on stage all those years ago at Star Wars Celebration, wearing a shirt with the most critical reveal in canon. Ahsoka lives.
I remember that.
But that is my take on this. Honestly, this theory is one that I've really been a large antagonist towards. It just felt too much like fan fiction. But the more I'm looking at the evidence and the more I'm looking at what's happening, the more I can't deny the sequels and The Mandalorian can't take place in the same timeline. There's just too much that cancels each other out, almost like Snoke's existence depends on Moff Gideon capturing the child and the Mandalorian dying. And that would be the logical course of action if Ahsoka hadn't been there to direct the Mandalorian to Tython. Almost as if these events have to take place in separate timelines. As unlikely as it is, I can't help but feel like this is actually the direction that they've decided to go. And I believe that it's actually possible that this may be explained in the Ahsoka series. We know that the Ahsoka series has a logo very reminiscent of the art style of the World Between Worlds. And maybe that's not telling us that they will use the World Between Worlds in that series, but maybe they will outright explain, or even show us what would have happened had the World Between Worlds not been used to save Ahsoka. It's reasonable to assume that if Ezra hadn't intervened, Ahsoka would have died there, and that this shot of Vader is a shot of a Vader who had just killed his apprentice. But all of that changed 4 years later when Ezra went back and saved Ahsoka. But I want to know what you guys think. Does everything hinge on the line, Ahsoka lives. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because as always, I want to know what you, my friends, have to say about our favorite galaxy far, far away. And don't feel bad if you disagree with this, because honestly, this theory was really hard for me to swallow, and it took a lot for me to get here to the point where I am now sitting before you telling you that, yes, I do think that this has happened. And it feels really weird, but here I am. So thank you all so much for watching and sitting through my crazy ramblings, but I am really excited to share this with you, and I cannot wait to hear what you, my friends, have to say about this. But in the meantime, thank you.
That is, wow. I got to process everything I've heard. First and foremost, fantastic video by Lore Star. And again, thank you for allowing me to sit through this and react to this. I do appreciate that. And again, guys, go and let me drop a like on the video right now. Dropping a like on that video. Go over there, subscribe to Lore Star. Wow. Okay. So I am not going to, like, let me put this in context here. I don't think that any of this was planned out in advance. I absolutely don't. I think that there are convenient opportunities now that they could use these storytelling events to retcon the sequel trilogy. And some of those events are very convenient, but there are decisions that could have been made to push this theory forward, and I think that's what Lore Star is hanging on to the most, which makes the most logical sense, which is the elements of Luke Skywalker at the end of Mandalorian. That's really what elevates this to something that has some substance. Because, again, the actions of what happens with Luke at the end of Mandalorian Season 2 by taking Grogu and leaving with him 6 years prior to when the events of him taking Ben under his wing and teaching him, that sends everything into a different aspect for Luke Skywalker. Because, again, we do know Luke's story. We know how it ends. And when you introduce something that significant, because Baby Yoda, Grogu, is not a small character in terms of the impact that this character is going to have. This is a significant character. This character has revitalized the Star Wars universe. People have gone crazy over Baby Yoda. So the events that have taken place are very convenient. I don't think that Dave Filoni made any decisions in advance, because these decisions were happening while the sequel trilogy was, full steam ahead, and things looked like they were going to be successful. Obviously, that didn't work out. But there are some conveniences, and there are some actual decisions that have been made with Luke Skywalker that lead us to this place. And I'll be honest, this is the only opportunity they have right now. And I could see how, if you piece all of this together and all of what's happened in The Mandalorian, then you go back to what happened with the world in between worlds. If you piece all of this together, it almost makes sense. Like, I can't think of any actual issues with this theory if you actually put the sequels in an alternate timeline based on that moment right there before Ezra pulled Ahsoka out. If Ahsoka dies, then you could totally have an alternate timeline. This is a fantastic theory. This is a fantastic theory. And again, I credit all of you, because these are things that I haven't really been listening to a lot of this stuff, because, I mean, much how Lore Star talked about in his video, he's been a very much a critic of this retconning idea, but the way he broke it down, the timing, the decision, well, first of all, the conveniences of the storytelling in the past versus the actual decisions that they made in The Mandalorian with Luke Skywalker, it does lead me to believe that this is more possible than I believed it to be a few days ago. I am definitely looking at this through a different lens. And, I mean, Ahsoka is my favorite Star Wars character, so for her to have potentially have this much impact on getting rid of the sequel trilogy makes me happy. I'm a big fan of Dave Filoni. I'm a big fan of Jon Favreau. I've had issues with The Mandalorian, but overall, it's been a step in the right direction, and I've enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. But I do believe that if they were going to do this, They've never had a better opportunity, and this is the only opportunity. And the decisions with Luke, the end of The Mandalorian, Season 2, it does lead me to believe that this is very possible. Holy shit, I got a lot to think about, man. This is crazy. Because, again, I have not really listened to a lot of these theories because I just didn't think it was possible. Hearing this and hearing the breakdown and the logic behind it, and again, I don't believe that these are things that Filoni was thinking about 6 years ago or nothing like that, but I just believe that the events and the conveniences of the storytelling in the past versus what they've done with The Mandalorian now, if you merge those two things together, then you look at the failure of the sequel trilogy and the lack of enthusiasm surrounding these characters versus what you have in The Mandalorian. You have characters that fans actually care about. You have characters that fans are actually buying their merchandise. You have a huge opportunity. This is your moment right here, Lucasfilm. Are you going to fix it by admitting that you screwed up? Are you going to fix it? You have that opportunity right here. And it seems like they could already have made that decision. Wow. I'm interested. Great job, Lore Star. And again, thank you for letting me react to this. You guys have a great day. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this is possible? Are you still... No. Are you still done? Again, whatever your opinions are is totally fine with me. Because at the end of the day, you have the right to your opinion. If you hate Disney Star Wars, if you love Disney Star Wars, if you love Filoni, if you hate Filoni, it doesn't really matter to me. No one's going to change me and my opinions in terms of the characters I like and the people that are behind the creative efforts. The only people that can change my mind are those people. People like J.J. Abrams that once upon a time I was a fan of. J.J. Abrams has lost I've lost all faith in J.J. at this point. None. I have no faith in him whatsoever. But I'm a fan of Filoni, and I've loved everything Filoni has done with the exception of a few things here or there, and I would love to have Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni heading us in the right direction, having control of all of these characters, and giving us the Star Wars that we fans want. You guys have a great day. Thank you very much for checking out this video, and we will talk to you later.